Hello and welcome to BIA's Leading Local Insights podcast, where we examine the trends, technologies, platforms, and industry activities related to local media revenue. I'm Rick Ducey, BIA's Managing Director, and I'm here today with Roger Lanctot. Let me give a little bit of background to Roger, who is a very interesting person, has a great set of interconnected experiences and areas of expertise. Roger is Director of Automotive Connected Mobility as part of the Global Automotive Practice at TechInsights. And Roger has a 25-year history as an electronics industry market analyst. Roger is a very well-respected analyst, a frequent speaker globally, and writes a lot in this space. And he has a very popular LinkedIn blog that I definitely recommend you check out and subscribe to. And Roger is also a member of the International Motor Press Association and the Washington Automotive Press Association. Roger, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome to BIA's Leading and Local podcast. Wonderful to have you join us.
Great to join you, Rick. Thanks a lot.
You bet. Now, so I mean, there are people who are sort of silo experts. They know one thing really well, very deeply, and can speak on it forever. And then there are other people who are able to be bridge across these different silos. Rare people who have, left brains or right brains kinds of things. And a lot of change, the leading edge of innovations typically is not driven by silo, is by seeing connections. And that's you. I mean, you see these connections and you've picked kind of a home base in the automotive industry, but you really are, expert and have terrific insights and analysis in a lot of different industries. But pretty much you've devoted yourself, for the most part, to how this all comes together in the automotive industry. So you've got a fascinating role crossing fields related to the automotive space, consumer electronics, mobility, technology, geospatial stuff. And just to make a personal connection here, I took a course once in maritime archaeology, like finding sunken shipwrecks and stuff. And one of the things I learned from that research is that ships at any particular point in history tend to embody the highest level of technology, like even building a wooden ship hull, bending the wood and stuff like that, and all the navigation stuff, the power, whatever the power is, sails or whatever. And that's really what cars are like now, I guess. In some sense, they're the highest state of technology, and I guess flying cars and cars we launch into space as well. But I mean, these days cars are pretty incredible. I mean, I think you've described them as computers on wheels. And these days, I mean, it's not uncommon to have cars with over 3,000 microprocessors or computers in them. So of all the different things that you look at, study, analyze, and have really interesting expert insights on, could you just pick a few things that are sort of top of mind for you for what is going on that people should be thinking about? Then I'll come back and ask you to pick one of those and drill down a bit on that topic for us.
Well, it's funny you should talk about your maritime foray, because some of the problems that we're trying to deal with in the car in terms of vehicle-to-vehicle communications have already been taken on and solved in the maritime industry. They have
interesting
communications technologies to prevent ships from colliding with one another, which is obviously an important priority.
We hope.
Airplanes have completely different technology for the same purpose. Again, we don't want airplanes colliding, and they rather infrequently do. So clearly that technology is working very effectively. Cars, interestingly, the average pilot looks at this effort to bring autonomous vehicle functionality to cars with a great deal of skepticism, suggesting that, okay, autopilot in an airplane is one thing with all that sort of open space in the sky. It's quite something different on a road, with four wheels, trying to stay in a lane, et cetera, and in a much more two-dimensional environment than flying in the air.
Right.
But that being said, so the reason why cars have become kind of interesting, and I would have to say that for me, the industry kind of chose me. I've never been, one of these, people talk about, oh, I'm a real car enthusiast or aficionado. As you well know, Rick, I'm fond of saying that I'm more car tolerant than being a car enthusiast. But the challenge that cars present to the designers, to the engineers and marketers of these vehicles are serious, are significant, and pose a real, both an opportunity and a challenge, things that need to be overcome. A lot of it does revolve around safety, and increasingly a lot of it revolves around connectivity. So there are now many global requirements and mandates for software updating and cybersecurity, and you really can't deliver those value propositions without connectivity. But the average car owner isn't super interested in connectivity. They just want to connect their phone in the car, maybe at best. The perception is like, my connected experience is my phone, and in fact, that mobile device is a more attractive marketing opportunity for suppliers because the volumes are so much larger globally than developing technology for the car. Quite frequently, when companies come to me and they're talking about getting into the automotive industry, my first question back to them is, why? Were you mistreated as a child or something? I mean, are you just a glutton for punishment?
Oh boy.
Because there's a 3 or 4 year path to market to get your solution in the car, generally speaking. And once you do get in the car, you're expected to stand behind whatever your solution is for the next 10 to 15 years, because that car is going to be driving around. And in the case of software, that's probably 10 or 15 years of software updates, whereas your mobile phone, you're just using that for a few years, and you can bring a new phone out, it seems like in the blink of an eye by comparison to the automotive industry. But the value proposition of that connected experience in the car, where you're seat belted in, engaged in a potentially life-threatening proposition, but you're also a captive audience. And that's why it's become such a unique environment for the radio broadcast industry. So here you have a listener who is seat belted into their seat, forced, really engaged in something very intense. So they're very alert. So it's not a lean back listening experience. And they're probably on the way to engage in some commercial activity. So the advertising proposition is really, I think, underappreciated beyond the radio broadcast industry. Outside that space, there's a little understanding. But slowly, I think all of these collective industries are, whether it's the tech industry or the wireless industry or the automotive industry or the semiconductor industry, there's an increasing recognition that what I like to say is the car is a browser. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Everything you do in the car is an indication of intent. And so automakers want to capture that behavior, that understanding, that history, not unlike what Google has done with all of our activity on mobile devices, televisions, computers, our phones, and built a $100 billion industry around search and advertising. Well, I think it has not escaped the attention of the technology industry, and even for that matter, Hollywood, content creators and broadcasters, that the listening environment in the car is entirely unique and incredibly powerful. So I don't know how deep a dive we can go into this in this conversation today.
Well, it is
no surprise.
Yeah, I mean,
it was no surprise that at Radio Days Europe this week,
yep.
A top of mind conversation revolved around radio GPT. That the only thing missing was a connection of what radio GPT or Chat GPT might look like in the car.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. And I love that perspective. I mean, that's a really pretty empowering insight. The car as a contextual advertising platform, and it gives intent, and it also allows you to be predictive. Okay, this car is going somewhere on purpose. A human's driving it, and we can make some predictions based on that location and where it's coming from, where it's going to. I did have to pause a moment when you said it's an advertising environment where somebody seatbelted it in, and I kind of daydreamed a bit. Boy, wouldn't that be great on the TV side if we could strap people in and instead of worried about commercial skipping and so on. But that aside, so you're focusing there kind of on an auto experience inside the car, and of course we were just talking earlier, Roger, about how with ATSC3 being much more mobile friendly than the current TV standard, that audio, video, and data experience can further enrich this connected car environment, generally, but also as an advertising platform for engaging consumers.
So we saw this in the Mercedes-Benz investor presentation from just a few weeks ago, a big emphasis on bringing all forms of content into the car, audio, video. They even had an app, a video delivery platform called Zinc that was really spotlighted at the event, amazingly enough, as well as gameplay, Angry Birds, and other forms of gameplay in the car, including, some behaviors that should only be associated with either the rear seat or a parked proposition. But both Mercedes and actually Volkswagen, subsequent announcement at Mobile World Congress just a week or so after that, the Mercedes announcement, both of them have TikTok in the car. So really, it's social media in the dashboard. Now, we've been here before. 13 years ago, multiple automakers were introducing Twitter and Facebook in the car. That only lasted about a year or two before they were removed. There was suddenly like a light bulb moment. It really doesn't make any sense to have social media applications running in the dashboard. But there's a perception that if you're an automaker, particularly in the premium segment, you want to make all things possible throughout the vehicle, and you'll figure out the context, the safety implications later. But you want to be able to offer the customer everything and anything, is available in the car, accessible. Speaking personally, I would think automakers would want to create an environment where, again, you look at the customer comes in and sits and puts the seatbelt on. Well, actually, in Europe, they're mandating driver monitoring systems, required that there be a monitoring system to make sure you're paying attention, as well as to make sure you're not having a health episode of some kind. Now, once you have that driver monitoring system in play, both the camera and infrared, as in the case of GM Super Cruise in the US, you have to be paying attention, and then you could take your hands off the wheel. You could have a scenario, and it's already being deployed in China, where you're instantly credentialed, and in my mind, I would imagine the average car owner, driver would want their sort of favorite cloud resources, available to them, whether that's Netflix or Amazon, or Apple Cloud or Apple Music, whatever the case might be, whatever your preferred sort of environment,
I think
would automatically be infused in the car. And then, of course, there are, dare I say it, advertising implications.
Well, yeah, for that, I think maybe the two of us, Roger, should start up a business. We can have an ad-supported new video service. And you were talking about the, what happens in the driver's perspective, what happens in the passenger perspective, the back seat and parked. So my wife has a Tesla, so we spend a fair amount of time, at battery stations, and yeah, we can watch Netflix on the screen there, which is kind of cool. But I think we need to invent a new kind of medium, EV TV, for when you're charging up the batteries. I know companies like Sinclair has been partnering to deliver data and other things through charging stations. But I don't know, maybe that's what we need now, the EV version of TV for electric vehicles charging up. But all that's so fascinating.
Rick and Roger, R&R Media. I'm all for it.
Let's do it. Okay, hang on a second while I register the domain.
Okay.
that is cool. And so part of what you were saying in your blog post on that, the MBOS, the Mercedes-Benz Operating System, and the hardware, the whole stack, the hardware, the software, the content that goes along with that. You made reference earlier about walled gardens and how much Google has accomplished in technology and business, and won so much of the revenue coming back to the advertising side of all of this. But you spoke about an inflection point at this Mercedes presentation in terms of how Mercedes and Google are unpacking things and reassembling them in more interesting ways that imply some upside business opportunities and high value features being brought to Mercedes-Benz owners, drivers, passengers. What are you seeing there? What's that inflection point?
Yeah, so the key there, you're clearly referencing the unbundling of the Google UI, the Google user experience, and the Google control of the customer from all the Google resources like Google Places and Google Maps and all that critical content and information. Because one of the core value propositions that Google represents to the automakers is that Google POI data. So there are two organizations that have really high quality POI information, which is relevant obviously to advertisers and has very salient local, implications. If you're working with Google, you definitely want them to know all of your addresses, your opening hours, and you want that information to be accurately rendered anytime anybody is searching on Google. Similarly, you'd want Facebook to have the same level of accuracy and completeness for all of your information, and you'd want it all to be up to date. So that is immediately infused into the systems that Mercedes is bringing to market down the road. But the key will be that Mercedes is in control, not Google. So Mercedes has access to these resources, but they are not surrendering control of the customer and that data to Google. And it's quite possible that a sort of veiled threat from regulators was hanging over Google's head. And so they proceeded to this unbundling of their platform and, allowing for a little more liberal deployment of that system. Now, the idea of a contextual advertising proposition in the car, and certainly something that was sort of backstopped by or enabled by and supported by Google, would enable a contextual kind of engagement in the car, is something that the industry has been pursuing for at least 13 years. So AHA Radio, I don't know if you remember, Harman acquired AHA Radio about 13 years ago. And AHA Radio was intended to provide that contextual experience to bring in an ad hoc way all the weather, traffic, parking information you needed, and to be supported by advertising was the vision. Sad to say, it found its way into some cars, but it's long gone and faded away. But then GM, just about 6 or 7 years ago, originally working with IBM Watson and later working with a company called Zevo, created the GM Marketplace, which also was supposed to be a contextualized in-vehicle advertising platform that would take into account all those contextual cues and feed you offers presumably relevant to whatever activity you were doing based on either historical indications or stated interests, like maybe voice search, for a destination as you're in the car. That platform also fell by the wayside. It was supposed to be ad supported, and you would receive offers as you drove. And certainly there are some, distraction implications there, but it just never really got sufficient traction. And with consumers, and probably that related to a lack of advertising inventory that was really, relevant and able to drive consumer interest. There may have been some other plumbing elements to, how it was being delivered that might not have really, caught the imagination of the consumer. Now, what has changed since then, and it's worth noting that the original partner was IBM Watson. Remember, Watson was very voice driven. IBM was working with Via Voice and technology, and so voice in the car is becoming the predominant interface, and that is what is new here. That is that in most new cars today, the primary user interface is voice. We are clearly moving in this direction, and ChatGPT has demonstrated the value and importance of natural language recognition, and voice in the car is a natural. I mean, I don't know how natural it is to talk to your phone or to your TV, but using voice in the car makes a lot of sense. Now, sometimes it requires a young person, which was my circumstance with my new Hyundai. I did need one of my sons to say, "Dad, just use your voice, okay?"
Right.
So sometimes, the elders need a little bit of an assist here.
There you go.
But that is the core connection: the speech coming together with the tech resources, the offboard cloud resources, and the infusion and fusion of the onboard sensors and location awareness. So we may be getting to this dream in the automotive industry of a contextual advertising experience in the car. But I will say, radio has been doing it for 80 years, actually.
Exactly. Yeah,
Radio has been delivering a contextual advertising experience in the car for 80 years.
Right, and that's kind of building on this whole line that you're discussing here. Platform rollout, consumer adoption, and then bridging that over to, hey, radio's been doing this. Radio actually, I know you've been working with Xperi, writing about them, and kind of sharing some of their developments. So, I mean, of course, they brought in digital radio to the industry, but now their innovation, their platform they're bringing into the industry now is this DTS AutoStage, and that enables, and hopefully we'll have a higher adoption rate and faster adoption rate, some of the things you were just talking about, again, sort of on an audio data connected car theme.
So it's funny, you see that name, and I was listening as you said DTS AutoStage. I was thinking, is Rick going to get the name right? Because it doesn't exactly go trippingly off the tongue. However, it's a very important development in the market, in making radio a more of a visually engaging experience, which I think the radio is in desperate need of this, since it's no longer in command of the default screen in the car.
That's right.
Ever since we got the backup camera mandate, we lost the radio dial, and nothing sort of came back to take its place. And so, and it's not the default by any means. So what DTS AutoStage, it's sort of provided a palette to the automakers who design those user interfaces to figure out exactly what they want to do with all of those resources. And what it does is it infuses the radio with all the metadata. So the station art, the artist, the track, the program information. So now there's a huge motivator for the broadcast industry to sort out its metadata protocols, so that they can ensure that their content, their station is represented in the most consistent, recognizable way for that broadcast content consumer. And DTS AutoStage is enabling that experience. And so de facto, Hyundai vehicles, Mercedes, and Teslas, and Kias, actually, for that matter, and Genesis, they all are infused now with DTS AutoStage. And at least in the case of Hyundai, I know Hyundai's eating the, I would say, nominal cost of the wireless connectivity that's necessary to provide that dynamic data. So historically, Xperi was providing sort of fixed file, metadata content to go with the radio. So the radio didn't have to be connected to have access to a fixed data file that might have to be periodically updated. Now you have a dynamic connection to the DTS AutoStage platform. So by de facto, any radio that's using DTS AutoStage is a connected radio. It has a cellular connection supporting it with that dynamic metadata, and you don't have the dial anymore, but you have a picture of what you're listening to. And the next step, and this really, I keep asking them, and I don't think anyone's really capitalized on it yet, but the next step is an interactive advertising proposition enabled by DTS AutoStage, where there would be, trailers, going across the bottom that would be synchronized with the audio in some fashion, and there would be the potential to respond to a queue to get additional information or buy tickets or get an offer sent to your phone or whatever the case might be. No one's doing that yet that I know. And it's worth noting for any of your listeners who haven't yet picked up Jeff Smulian's book.
Oh, yes.
What is it? Never Ride a Roller Coaster Backwards. Is that what I never get the title right? But,
upside down, I think. Never Ride a Roller Coaster upside down. Backwards works too, though. I think that'd be Jeff approved.
But he talks about in there near the back of the book, so you have to get well into it. How basically the Emis's attempts to get Next Radio adopted many years ago was more or less shot down by iHeartMedia, and Next Radio was that first attempt to connect radio with a cellular back channel and to create a customer, a new level or a different kind of customer engagement opportunity. It has some challenges and shortcomings, and but it was, as we say about all new things, bold and innovative, and very clever, but unfortunately it was more or less nipped in the bud. But DTS AutoStage is the closest I've seen to an attempt to bring a potential back channel connection to that local radio advertising experience.
Exactly, and that's such a key thing. I mean, so you've got that allows broadcasters to, for their own, presence, have more engaged branding and content experiences for their audiences, audio as well as screen, text, image, potentially even a video, and interactive with that back channel. So really, unlocks a lot of empowering possibilities for using metadata, the connectivity, audio, text, image, and video in that connected car environment. So let me do a bridge to my last question, which is sort of a leading question. So much of digital advertising, particularly as you mentioned in the car, the car as context, that tells us something about the intent of what the people in that car are, have been doing, are doing, and are going to do next. Really valuable signals from an advertising segmentation and targeting perspective. And in the car, where the car is a key element of it. And you want to have, advertising, news, traffic, everything be, geographically relevant. So if you're, say in the Bay Area, if you're in East Bay, you probably want to get different kinds of ads, different kinds of traffic information than you would in South Bay or, in San Francisco. Cars, users expect that kind of geographic relevance. So the last thing I just want to touch base with you on is you've written and commented on a technology that's now being considered for adoption for FM radio by the FCC, and this is a technology. One of the companies kind of led this charge with the FCC for disclosure is one of BIA's clients, GeoBroadcast Solutions. But their technology innovation allows FM boosters to be configured into single frequency networks. And then that makes a better signal throughout an authorized coverage area, filling in weak spots. Typically the job of an FM booster, their technology arguably, and based on some market data, supports this conclusion that it does a good job. Those boosters technically could originate content. So you could have, as GeoBroadcast did in the Bay Area. You could have an East Bay zone, and you get East Bay traffic, and then you could have a South Bay San Francisco zone and get San Francisco, Bay Bridge traffic. But that's controversial in the industry. This notion of over-the-air geo-targeting for FM radio stations. BIA tracks 16 local media. 15 of the 16 local media do geo-targeting all day, actually including radio, but just their digital offerings, their mobile apps and websites. It's just over-the-air broadcast radio that is forbidden by the FCC, by the federal government, from doing geo-targeting. Sort of curious, and it's more curious to me, having been in this industry forever, why it's even controversial. Why would you not want to use it? But I know that you have you've spent some time thinking about this. So what about over-the-air FM geo-targeting?
Me have an opinion on ZoneCasting from GeoBroadcast?
I'm going to try to see if you have an opinion and then see if I'm able to extract it from you, Roger.
Well, all I can say is the radio broadcast industry is in desperate need of opportunities around technology and innovation. And this is one of the few and rare opportunities where there is something new under the sun in broadcast technology. And it would enable something that this one segment of the content creation world, which has the broadest reach, no matter where you conduct your survey globally, radio has always got the greatest reach. But what it lacks that every other medium has is the ability to geo-target in some fashion. And as I understand the proposition that's currently before the FCC in the US, we're only talking about 3 minutes per hour
Right.
that would be geo-targeted.
Right.
So it's not huge, and it could be content, it could be alerts, or it could be advertising. But you can imagine, I have to think about it from this perspective of a Washington, D.C. area resident. I'm not really interested in traffic reports about the Beltway in Maryland, living in Northern Virginia as I do. So I would really welcome more geo-targeted information. Our surveys of listeners, or rather of people, car owners and buyers, and it's worth noting here, since neither of us have mentioned this, that more than 50% of listening is happening in the car. The things that are most important to them from a connected services standpoint are traffic, weather, and parking information.
Right.
And traffic and weather are location relevant. Then figure in other aspects, like political advertising, or just there's so many categories of local advertising where you would not want to be getting ads for something that's another state away from you. So the value proposition to the consumer seems pretty straightforward, and my understanding of the technology from the standpoint of testing and proving it out, clearly there are still some skeptics or concerns that need to be ironed out, but it seems like the best available research indicates that this would not be disruptive from a technological broadcasting quality standpoint. There have been some concerns expressed about business model impact on advertising, that cheaper rates for any advertising that would be taking place during those 3 minutes would lead to a race to the bottom for the broader advertising rates for the entire listening area. I think Rachel Maddow has an expression for that. I think she would say bullpucky, but I don't know if that's safe to say in this context. But it's just nonsense. I think what it opens the doors to new advertising and new customer engagement opportunities, and that's what radio needs right now is something new to change up the conversation and change the recognition of the value proposition. As well as to level the playing field a tiny bit, and that tiny bit being 3 minutes per hour. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that subject.
That's really insightful, and I know you've thought about that a lot, so it's really helpful to get different perspectives on this. Well, Roger, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you for joining our podcast. Really appreciate this, It's always educational, stimulating, and I guess challenging a little bit to try to take all of your ideas and insights and kind of reformat my vision of the world. But I'm also appreciative of that. So thank you so much for joining us on BIA's Local Leading Insights podcast. And to everyone in the audience listening to us today, please join me in thanking Roger. Thank you for listening to us. We look forward to having you join us again. Check us out, BIA Advisory Services, at www.bia.com. And when you go to our site, we have a free daily newsletter that we get a lot of good compliments on. So hopefully check that out and subscribe to it. Again, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Roger, and have a great day, everyone.